Shall we invite the administration in, please? Item number 1, information papers issued since the last meeting. I gather the members have received the papers. Item number 2, items for discussion at the next meeting. There are 2 papers there. The next meeting is scheduled for the 19th of January 2015, a Monday at 10:45. 2 items there. Number 1, briefing by the SCS on the policy initiatives of the CSB, featuring in the 2015 policy address. And number 2, an overview of training and development of civil servants. Any comments? Shall we have these 2 items on the agenda for the next meeting? All right, then let's move on to item 3, employment situation of non-civil service contract staff, or NCSC. I'd like to invite the Secretary to take us through the paper, and then I throw the floor open for questions and comments, and for 5 minutes each. Secretary, please. Chairman, thank you. Members, as of June this year, we have the latest situation for members. Our policy basically is that this is used for time-limited seasonal jobs that are subject to market fluctuations, and they're working for less than the conditioned hours. And we may need to tap the latest expertise in a particular area, and there may be mode of service delivery which is under review. And it's only under these circumstances that we will hire NCSC staff. For long-term jobs of long-term permanent nature, and we will consider converting them to civil service posts. As of June 2014, we have 2,960 NCSC staff that can be taken up by the civil servants. Of these 2,000 odd, 2,300 have already been converted to long-term civil service posts. For the remaining 600, by the time the posts are created, or by the time their contracts expire, we will deal with them accordingly. There are a couple of points, some figures for members. As of 30th of June 2014, we have 12,147 full-time NCSC staff, a drop of about 700. It was 12,900 last year. At the peak, we had 16,400, so this represents a sharp reduction. About 2/3, or 63%, are high for less than 5 years. 90% of the contracts are less than 2 years, and they earn between $8,000 to $16,000. That's 59%. Between $16,000 and $30,000, about 22%. Above $30,000, so 14%. As I said just a moment ago, for those serving for a longer period of time, I'm sure that the members are concerned. There has been a reduction there. June 2014, 37%, 4,500 have been serving more than 5 years. And that's a reduction on last year. Last year, the number stood at 4,700. the number of aspects to those longer-serving NCSC staff. Some of them are not serving in one single post. They may have been transferred. And for other cases, the review is still underway. And for some of the review, like the continuous training fund that goes on for at least 10 years. Now, when we convert the post to permanent posts, we would like to keep those NCSC staff that are more experienced. So the experienced ones will be serving for a longer period of time. Now, we may have a reduction in numbers. Those more experienced ones, those who have been serving in the post for a longer period of time, may not be reduced all that rapidly. Perhaps I pause here, Chairman. Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, Mr. Lee Chok Yen, Mr. Martin Liao, Mr. Yip Kun Yuen. All right, Mr. Wong Kwok Heng first. Chairman, thank you. Well, the NCSC staff, I welcome the idea of converting them to permanent posts. At the peak, it was 16,000. Now it is standing at 12,047. And I hope that the administration will work harder in this regard. I've got two questions for the Secretary, if I may. First of all, regarding the LCSD, according to newspaper reports recently, there are some venues like the museum or the Museum of Arts. The attendance rate has been increasing instead of the other way around. The LCSD contracts out some of the management and some of the NCSC staff have been sacked. Now, for those grassroots workers, they are under tremendous pressure, in particular at this time of the year, and I hope that the Secretary will follow up on this. These posts cannot be converted into permanent posts, but at the end of the year, they should not be given the sack, and I hope that the Secretary will follow up on this. My second question is, now for the long-term staff, they are experiencing a pay rise. Because of the filibustering, the pay rise may not materialize as of now, but once an FC has endorsed the funding proposal, the pay rise will be backdated to April. But for the contract staff, the NCSC staff, what is the situation like for them? And I hope that the Secretary will tell us whether or how their pay rise will be treated for the NCSC staff. Secretary, Chairman, I'd like to emphasize that it is our policy to reduce the number of NCSC staff. But as I said, because of the situation that I highlighted, we still have to resort to NCSC staff. Now, for long-term jobs that are suitably taken up by the civil service, we will convert them into civil service posts. For LCSD, I don't have specific details with me. I'll find out about it. I don't think they are NCSC staff per se. They are outsourced staff, and maybe because of the change in the job nature, there is some change in the demand for manpower, and I don't think they are directly hired by the LCSD as NCSC staff, but I'll find out about the situation. Second, about pay adjustment for the NCSC staff. They don't have to follow the civil service system. And normally, civil servants will get a pay rise in summer, and they will follow a similar pattern. This year, because of the exceptional circumstances, we still haven't seen the pay rise approved. So having regard to this, we have notified the departments that the NCSC staff don't have to get a pay rise in accordance with the time frame of the civil servants, because these funding sources do not come from the FC approved package. Some had the pay rise in July, August, and so on, and the pay rise is ahead of the civil servants themselves. They followed the time frame because the pay rise will normally be effected in summer, but I mean we don't get the 2014 pay rise approved until probably sometime later, so they will get the pay rise ahead of time. Mr. Wong, now what is the rate of increase for the NCSC staff? Secretary, Mr. Wong, different departments have different pay rise, but basically the civil servants have 3 bands of pay rises, but they are similar to the pay rise for the 3 bands of civil servants. Mr. Lee Choi-yan. Well, I think they are very much labeled as second-class workers, and this is an excuse for the government to exploit the cheap labor. We had 16,000 previously. Now the number is still standing at 12,000. Of the 12,000, 50% of them have been working for more than 3 years. I think they are subject to exploitation. There is indeed a long-term demand for these posts, and you're not converting them to long-term posts. The Post Office, LCSD, Education Bureau, EMSD, you are citing the excuse of meeting the market fluctuation. Now, if the market fluctuates so badly, you don't need the 900 for MSD, 400, 500 for DB, and so on. I think you are really concocting an excuse to say that this is subject to market fluctuation. Now, you need 900 people as a rule every single year. I think you are really taking them for a ride. The history proves that they are not there for just a couple of years. Now, the post office does need this complement of staff, as always. If not, then you would not have the numbers standing at 12,000. So I think that shows that the government is giving us all this rhetoric that you are meeting the market fluctuation. Now, you shouldn't be telling us anything about the lifeguard, which is seasonal in terms of demand. But every single year, we have 900 for post office, we have 500 for LCSD. Historically, the number has been hovering around the same level. Such being the case, shouldn't they have been converted into permanent posts? And the CSB is condoning the departments to exploit the workers. You have the guiding principles of meeting market fluctuation. You're allowing them to exploit the staff. I think you're blind to the situation, and you're turning a blind eye to the situation and allow the situation to go on like this. And this is an unfairness that has been going on for a long time.
And you're talking about upward movement for young people, but the people are being treated as fools because they have been engaged as NCSC staff. And what about in public schools? There are many teachers, and the demand, I don't think that will be changed because we need teachers to teach in schools. So how can we keep talking about upward movement of the youth? It sounds nice, but you are treating young people and many other staff as fools. So for many years, we have been expressing our dissatisfaction. There is no direct response from the administration. So you can continue to procrastinate, and understand that the Secretary does a very good job in procrastination, and eventually something bad will happen. So are you going to review all these positions that are responding to market fluctuations? Can you give us the breakdowns in the past years? How many such positions have been created? If in the past 10 years we see more or less the same figure for Hong Kong Post, can you tell us how you are not treating them as fools? Well, of course I don't agree. Well, of course, you have been treating them as foolish people. You will never agree. As I've explained, some of the positions have been around for a longer time because they do seasonal work. I've already told you not to talk about seasonal work. There are seasonal works and there are non-seasonal positions. I already told you not to refer to those positions. Can you let me talk first? LCSD, for example, has temporary lifeguards. That is one example. And then there are some trading funds that are self-sufficient financially. We allow them more flexibility to engage their own staff. Well, trading funds are never included in the 4 principles. Why are you talking about that all of a sudden? Can you clarify? How come the trading fund is not incorporated into the 4 principles? I have looked at the 4 guiding principles for engaging NCSC staff. The term trading fund has never appeared. Can you explain why? Secretary, as we have explained in the past, trading funds are operated on self-sufficiency principles. If their staff are in law enforcement, we will engage civil servants, but there are also positions set up to cater for market needs. The trading fund is a bit different because of its nature, and we need to allow more flexibility. But that does not appear in the paper. We allow them to engage NCSC staff as needed. There could be a second round. Next one is Mr. Liu Xiongkong opinion, and then Wen Shicheng. Mr. Liu first. Thank you, Chairman. In recent years, many government departments have been engaging NCSC staff with the excuse of meeting market fluctuations. So they are engaged on contract terms for rather long terms. And after a while, the morale level will drop, and the service quality will also be affected. What measures do you have to enhance the level of morale and retain the right talents to ensure quality service and effective services? Second question. Beginning from 2011, LCSD has decided that at all public libraries there will be this mixed mode of service provision. Civil servants will provide core and support services, and non-contract staff, non-civil service contract staff will be there to provide seasonal services. Have you considered using the same mixed mode of service provision in other government departments? If you do, what are the criteria for setting the ratio between civil servants and NCSC staff to achieve the best level of efficiency? Mr. Liu, you have mentioned a few points. First of all, when NCSC staff are engaged by all the departments, they will consider the market situation and also the service conditions, terms, salary package, so on and so forth. They should be comparable to the market offer. Otherwise, they won't be able to engage enough staff. So naturally, there is a balance. As I've explained, in most cases, they will have pay rises according to the service-wide pay rise. And sometimes, in some cases, the pay rise level may be higher than the general civil service. For example, those with special expertise, but they don't work for very long term, and after a number of years, we need a second batch of people. So basically, we need to consider market needs. For longer term positions, if they can be taken up by civil servants, the NCSC staff will be phased out, but they can apply for the positions within the service. And success rate in the past was around 16%. For other applicants, the success rate is only 2%, so they do enjoy this advantage. For example, they have been working at a position for quite some time, and the position is going back to the established civil service, and they enjoy a competitive edge. The service provision mode in public libraries may not be applicable to other departments, so we will consider operational needs of different departments, and they will also present their needs to us. What about morale? For NCSC staff, as I have explained, we have to consider the market conditions, and they are subject to pay rises as well. This is how we ensure NCSC staff are satisfied with their work. Of course, before they enter, they understand that the nature of the service is different from the civil servants, and not all of them would like to stay with the government for a very long time. So the market will decide the demand level and also the salary package. Secretary, if I join as an NCSC staff and you tell me this is a short-term contract, if you continue to engage me for more than 3 years, my morale will be affected. How come I'm doing the same work, but I'm not treated as a civil servant? How do you deal with such impacts on morale? Well, because they are engaged under contracts, they are time-limited work, perhaps for 3 to 5 years. And when that staff enters, they understand the contract will only last for 5 years. So there is mutual understanding. In some cases, when they are completed with one position, they will take another contract position. And afterwards, they can make new application, and perhaps there is a pay rise before the second contract begins. Mr. Ip Kim Yoon, Chairman, if you refer to the Education Bureau, they also engage a large number of NCSC staff. Last year, there were 1,190 people, and this year 1,178 people. The difference is only 12 staff. Are you happy with this progress? Because the administration keeps talking about making improvements. Because the NCSC arrangement is not ideal. If you compare the figures for the 2 years, there are some differences. Last year, reasons for employment were basically because of school-based management scheme and special operational needs of public schools. 909 people were engaged, and this year that has been scrapped. And for the 900-odd people, they have been categorized into 2 types. One is to cater for time-limited seasonal service needs, 600-odd people, and then the second batch, mode of service delivery under review or likely to be changed, 500 odd. So for these 2 types of people, they are mainly working in public schools. So I don't quite understand. This breakdown allows us to understand better that there are some positions that are time limited and seasonal, and then some the nature of service are being reviewed or to be changed. But what does that really mean? Inside public schools, what type of work is seasonal? What type of work is being under-reviewed or likely to be changed in relation to the mode of service delivery? Can you explain more, especially for the positions inside public schools? Thank you for the question. For the Education Bureau, they have 1,178 full-time NCSC staff. 380 odd are working in public schools, and basically they are serving time-limited or short-term positions. For example, they are providing services in relation to funds and grants. So all these are quite short-term positions. We also have the language support scheme, and also under the free kindergarten education scheme, there are positions that are time limited as well. 200 odd of such staff are engaged at the headquarters of the EDB. Some, the service delivery mode are being reviewed or will be changed soon. 500 odd are working under the funding flexibility scheme in government schools. And then a smaller number of them are working under different schemes in relation to new arrival students and non-Chinese speaking students. The Education Bureau will need to engage people from the open market to carry out work that is not being carried out by existing civil servants. For example, under the Basic Competency Assessment Project, about 0.5% of such staff, they work less than the conditioned hours. For example, assistant operational officers, they visit schools from time to time to inspect the work of non-registered schools. But their working hours are very different from the civil servants. These are basically the positions where the NCSD staff are engaged. Well, Secretary, you talked about funding flexibility scheme in government schools, where NCSC staff are engaged. I want to ask about the scheme. Why do you call it funding flexibility scheme? And the people engaged are engaged on contract terms. The purpose is to allow flexible use of resources in government schools. So at different times, the schools may need different talents. For example, for a certain subject, they need some staff, or at a different time, they need help for a different subject. So Leng Shicheng, I think my questions have probably been raised by other members, but I have to ask them anyway. Such full-time NCSC staff, the current number is quite big. Should be 12,000 odd at the moment. So these people are serving the government, serving the public of Hong Kong, and it is not a small number. Why for so many years? More than 4,000 people engaged for more than 5 years, and they are not switched over to the civil service establishment.
I don't think this is being reasonable at all. They've been working for the department for 5 years, and they must be really experienced, and the jobs are pretty stable. Why can't they be converted into civil service posts? Secretary said there are some who have been, but for 5 years, the number stands at something like 4,000. Now, for those who've been working for the department for 5 years, why is it that they should not be considered being hired for a long-term basis? The other thing I'd like to say is that I think it was last year the number dropped to the lowest to the level registered in 2001, 2002, 14,500 in 2011, in 2009, 16,000. Does it mean that there are more NCSC staff that have been switching over to civil service posts? Well, the other thing, which is a hot topic recently, I think Mr. Kwok, who is a lifeguard himself, on TV or in the media, we get to learn that he doesn't seem to be suffering from any injuries. Now, during his leave of absence, the speaker is not speaking through. Well, we are talking about NCSC staff, and I think Mr. Leung is talking about a specific case. Why is he bringing up this specific case? We are talking about the NCSC system, and your ruling, please, Chairman, we should not be talking about this. I think we talked about this last time. Mr. Leung, if what you said has something to do with the NCSC scheme, then fine. Chairman, I haven't quite finished. Why do you judge that this is not related? I'm just wondering whether situations like this do occur with regard to the NCSC staff. If this kind of situation occurs, how will the CSB deal with it? Secretary. Chairman, there are 2 points there. The first one is the NCSC staff who have been serving for a pretty long time. As I said, some of them are moving on from one post to another, so taken together, they may seem to be working there for a long time. As I said, there are certain jobs that would take a pretty long time to complete, and there are certain posts that we don't have specific civil service posts like the telephonist and so on. So we rely on the NCSC staff for this purpose. Indeed, there are quite a lot of NCSC staff that have been successfully able to apply for civil service posts. Now, for the 4,000 NCSC staff that have been replaced, something like 44.4 of them, or 1,800, managed to switch over to civil service posts. Now, for civil servants or NCSC staff, if they suffer from work injury, we will deal with them in accordance with the established procedures. Ms. Claudia Mo, Chairman. I've been here in LegCo for about 2 years or more. We've been debating these issues for so long. The government may be trying to save taxpayers' money, and some of the jobs are seasonal in nature. Now we have this budget overrun to the tune of billions and billions of dollars. When you talk about saving taxpayers' money, the RTHK case, Mr. Chairman, is a unique situation. Now this is a public broadcaster. This is a broadcaster with conscience. There are some reporters with RTHK for 20 years on NCSC terms. And this cannot be seasonal. This cannot be temporary. My question for the Secretary is this. For public bodies like this, maybe they are dealing with the ideologies, and there may be more political control. Now, reporters, there are some reporters who have retired, and they retired on NCSC terms. The demand is forever there. My question is, for RTHK, there are 200 or close to 300 NCSC staff working there. You must have some statistics with you. Can you tell us some information about the situation with regard to RTHK? How many of them have been working there as NCSC staff? Secretary? Chairman, thank you. I don't think we should talk about specific cases. However, there are 2 points I'd like to make. All government departments have to abide by the guiding principles when considering converting the posts from NCSC to permanent staff. I understand that RTHK needs to absorb talents from the market in the creative industry in particular. So you do have a fair number of NCSC staff which simply don't have this kind of talents within the civil service. Now, you mentioned the seasonality. Now, we all understand that the civil service has the beauty of being stable. It is so-called an iron rice bowl. But there are jobs that of a short-term nature. Then we may suffer from a surplus of staff to requirement. Ms. Mo, well, this is a really typical gobbledygook. Now, I'm not talking about specific cases. Now, these reporters have retired already. I am talking about an example. At the political level, has the Bureau or the CSB looked at the situation? Have there been people who are politically incorrect, and they have been on NCSC terms for a good many years, and they're still not considered for permanent posts? Have you ever considered all these situations? Well, we're not dealing with specific cases. We're looking at the job nature. If the jobs are best suitably taken up by the civil servants, we will certainly do so. And the NCSC staff are of a temporary nature, and they can apply for the permanent posts. Well, Secretary, can you tell us for RTHK how many years have an NCSC staff been serving? Now, we're talking about 287 people there. Well, I can supplement the information in writing. Mr. Teng Ka-Piu? Chairman, thank you. Now, first of all, in terms of total number, we are looking at a reduction from 13,000 to 12,100. But these are long-term NCSC staff, or the full-time NCSC staff. But what about those NCSC staff who are not working full-time? Well, at the LAB, we had discussions on the continuous contract of employment, what we call the 418 arrangement. How many non-full-time NCSC staff are there? Second, are you being a lawful and employer with conscience? Are they putting in less than 72 hours? Or is it the case that they were less than 18 hours for the first 3 weeks and then 17 hours for the final week of the month. Are you trying to cut corners in this regard? So you have to tell us how many part-time NCSC staff there are and what sort of hours are they putting in. Second, we have made it very clear before that for the NCSC staff, we hope that they will be converted into civil service posts as time goes by. And many a time they would be seeking severance pay and long service payment. We may be talking about 2,000 or so people out of the 12,000. How many cases are there in which there has been an offsetting arrangement applied to them? Now we have to twist our arms in order to get the statistics. Like Mr. Wong Kwok Heng said, these are 5 nothing workers, and how many of them, how much has been spent in the offsetting arrangement. Now, the other thing I'd like to mention is the efficiency unit. Now, the 1823 hotline, there is no seasonality with regard to the hotline, and the phone, the line is manned 24 hours a day. Now, why is it that for so many years this telephone inquiry hotline, 1823, 90% were engaged in this 1823 telephone inquiry service? Now, you're not telling me that the hotline will not be manned during summertime. Now, why don't you convert these posts into a permanent civil service posts? They have built up a big wealth of expertise. Now, with this department, for instance, why are you not converting them into permanent posts? Secretary, a couple of points there. There are 7,300 who are not full-time NCSC staff. I think Mr. Tang is well aware, and they are well within the 418 arrangement. As regards the MPF, our policy is in accordance with the legislative provisions. As regards the detailed statistics, I don't have them with me at the moment. Regarding the efficiency unit, we have these telephonists. We don't have this particular post within the civil service. So the efficiency unit is considering the turnover arrangement. In the private sector, this kind of posts would be rather volatile in terms of the turnover. The efficiency unit is experiencing less of a turnover compared with the private sector. Well, Chairman, unless you don't keep the 1823 inquiry hotline, if you want to keep this, you have to go beyond the short-sightedness in the private sector. Secretary, Chairman, if it may not be an appropriate arrangement to create a post out of this because there is not that much progression in this particular post. Mr. Tony J., Chairman. Well, with regard to the NCSC staff, they're there to meet the manpower demand in a flexible manner. I find this really an appropriate arrangement. This will alleviate the manpower shortage. Now, there was a mention of the infrastructural projects, the filibustering exercise, and the non-cooperative movement. However hard you try, you will not be able to offset the wasteful use of the taxpayers' money.
Since there are more than 10,000 NCSC staff, engaged in contract terms. They are providing more or less the same services, but under the different packages. There are some seasonal positions, and perhaps the percentage of such positions is not too high, and perhaps they are providing different services. I'm just worried about morale being affected if people are doing more or less the same work, but they are offered different packages. Hopefully, Secretary, you can offer some help to such NCSC staff so that they enjoy a high level of morale. That is the first point. Second question. Under 2C, latest expertise in a particular area. When you talk about latest expertise, what is the time frame you are referring to? Sometimes it could last for a long time. Nowadays, technological advancements lead to changes and shorter cycles in the society when it comes to knowledge. Are you going to employ a different batch of people every now and then? Thank you for the questions. Concerning remuneration in different departments according to different work needs and working hours, different packages are offered. If in a department they are offering something that is far less favorable than the market rate, they won't be able to employ people. So the remuneration package should reflect the market rate. I can give you an example. When it comes to IT talents, the time frame involved for such positions also depends on different departments. Normally, they range from 1 year to 3 years. Chairman, I asked the second question because, as other speakers have said, for the efficiency unit, 400-odd people must be equipped with the latest knowledge and expertise. So what does that mean for the 400-odd people? They must have the latest market expertise. Are we talking about something relevant in the past 6 months to 12 months? Basically, for the 400-odd staff, most of them are engaged in the 1823 telephone inquiry service. Only a small number are IT experts, around 3% only. And they're engaged for 1 to 3 years. For the telephone hotline, as I've explained, such positions cannot really be turned into civil servants' work. We cannot create a grade to just answer phone calls. There will be retention and promotion difficulties. So we have talked to the EU, and they feel that engaging people in contract terms would be more appropriate. We understand that people will come and go, but they just need some basic staff training, and they can hand over the work relatively easily. Ko Wai Kang and myself are still in round 1. Ko Wai Kang. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Secretary. I would like to ask about the review on NCSC. In 2006, there was the last comprehensive review. It's been 8 years. Are you going to have another comprehensive review in the near future so that you can identify NCSC staff who can be switched over to the permanent establishment? Last time you identified 4,000 such people, and this year 3,955 of them have already switched over to the permanent establishment. So once you have the review, we can see the results. So my question is, when are you going to have another comprehensive review? In 2006 to 2014, 2,960 NCSC positions have been assessed as positions with long-term service needs. 2,330 have already switched over to the permanent establishment. What about the remaining 600 odd? Do they have to wait another 8 years? Because the last review was 2006. And that was actually done by mid this year. So what will happen to the remaining 600 odd staff? Thank you for the questions. The past 2 years, I've explained to you that there is no need to have a comprehensive review just like the one in 2006, because we have already established our policy. We are doing this ongoing review year on year. Whenever needed, we will talk to all the bureaus and departments if they need to switch certain positions over to the permanent establishment. They will make such applications while they apply for funding support. In the coming year, there will be more positions switched over. Once we set the budget, we will offer more details. There's no need for another comprehensive review because we have been doing this in an ongoing manner. For the remaining 600 odd positions, I cannot tell you the answer today, but within the next financial year, we'll be able to allocate funding to complete the work. Any follow-up? No? A similar question. If you look at the figures in 2006, at the time 16,000 odd NCSC staff, 4,000 can switch over to can be replaced by permanent staff, and then 2,000 odd can switch over. So if you do the math, 16,000 minus 6,960, the end figure is 9,000 odd. So we are talking about 2,610 such staff who meet the target. They have to be handled, and there is still a shortfall. Maybe I can ask Mr. Chen to explain the figures. Thank you, Chairman. 4,000 fell under the special review, and they were identified as positions where we could switch them over to civil service positions. Later on, in 2014, as the Secretary has said, every year we ask departments to actively review existing NCSC positions and work that actually are needed on a permanent basis and can be switched over to civil service positions. And the figure was 2,960. So total was 16,000 minus 7,000. We have 9,000 odd remaining. So if we focus on the 9,000 odd, members are concerned that more than 600 positions are yet to be switched over. We will ask the bureaus and departments to, within the next financial year, switch over all such positions. But it takes time to do recruitment and filling of the vacancies. As for the overall target, the remaining figure should be 9,000. for the NCSC scheme, we do see that when the need for certain positions diminishes, the positions can be phased out. But at the same time, there are new positions needed, and they are also time limited. So there is subtraction and also addition to the sum. And that is why we are standing at 12,000 odd this year in June. 3 members for the second round, 3 minutes each. Mr. Lee Chak-yen. Chairman, I think the Secretary has not discharged his duties. The government hotline is one example. There's no reason why they should not fall under A, B, C, and D principles. If you don't have such a grade, if there's long-term need, just create the grade. Secondly, in terms of supervising the departments, he has not done his job. Education Bureau, 1,178. 10 years ago, it was 1068. LCSD, more or less the same figure. EMSD, it used to be 896. And Hong Kong Post, it used to be 1,553. So the figures exceed 1,000 for Hong Kong Post, LCSD, and also EMSD. You haven't done your job. And then you suddenly refer to the trading fund. Are you saying that the trading funds do not need to be supervised? I'm sure they do, because I've seen another paper saying that we need to supervise the trading fund using the same 4 principles. Then obviously, all these departments have violated the 4 principles. They have long-term need, but they continue to engage NCSC staff. Otherwise, we would not be looking at such huge figures over the past 10 years. So you talked about the trading fund as an excuse. You have gone against your own policy, because the trading fund should not be considered as a reason. So you have failed in 2 areas, lack of supervision and also the government hotline. You are treating them as fools by not switching them over to the permanent establishment. The 1823 hotline, I have already explained on that. I have nothing much to add. The efficiency unit has given thorough consideration to this, and they think the current mode is more suitable. As for the figures for the other departments, there have been some newly added positions, as Mr. Chen has explained. So if you just look at the final figure for comparison, it is not comprehensive. The most important thing is for those positions that can be switched over to the permanent establishment. For the 4,000 odd, they have all been switched over, and then 2,900 odd, 2,300 odd have already been switched over. What about the trading fund? Yes, the third point, trading fund. We will support the departments if they want to switch certain positions over to the permanent establishment, but they are self-sufficient and there is no cap on the quota. There is no such thing as a quota for the trading funds, because we understand that they have special operational needs and they are different from other departments.
Chairman, just one word. With the trading fund, you should apply the same guiding principles, and they shouldn't have any flexibility. You didn't mention the trading fund. As long as there is a long-term need, you should allow them. The post office, LCSD, you need these posts on a long-term basis. You should not be fooling us by saying that there has been deletion and creation. We do need these posts on a long-term basis. Mr. Kim Yun. 1823, the hotline then, Chairman. The are governed by the four guiding principles, but the 1823 are not really covered by the four principles, unless you add another principle to govern the hotline. It would be very unacceptable and unreasonable. I hope that the Bureau will consider this seriously. Couple of points, couple of requests, in fact. Mr. Lee Cho-yan talked about the comparison with 10 years ago. We have the statistics year on year. Perhaps in future we can have the comparative statistics year on year for better reference. Second request, E3, the Education Bureau. There has been some improvement this year because the breakdowns have been adjusted. Now, for those NCSC staff, how long have they been serving? Can you also give us another breakdown regarding the length of service? The Secretary said, mentioned the different categories. Can you give us the specific details with regard to the individual breakdowns, please? My third request is for the chairman. Now, with regard to the hiring of the NCSC staff, I think this is the second or third time since I took office as councillor. Are there any specific ways to deal with the NCSC staff, merely reviewing the figures over the years? Perhaps we can have another agenda item on the way forward regarding the NCSC staff. There are so many NCSC staff members. Will they eventually be breaching over to civil servants, or will they be sacked when the contract expires? Or will they carry on in their capacity as NCSC staff forever and ever? Are there any ways and means to make improvement to the situation? Finally, within the Education Bureau, if the teachers have they have to build up their experience and their expertise, and they have to have a sense of belonging instilled in them, and the situation is crying out for improvement, and the teachers should not be hired on NCSC terms anymore. Secretary. Very quickly, Chairman, 1823, the hotline there, I've already explained that these, of course, are long-term jobs, but these kind of jobs may not be suitably taken up by the civil servants. Regarding the 10-year comparative figures, I can certainly make them available, but in 2007 we had 18,000. We have seen a reduction to 12,147 as of now. As regards Mr. Yip's other requests, certainly I will take them up after the meeting. There are some NCSC staff that have already been converted. There have been 1,800 or so of 44.7 or 47.4%. Mr. Wong Kwok-heng, Chairman. Now, for these NCSC staff, I'm wondering whether the government can take the lead to remove the offsetting arrangement of LSP and SP for them. Now, in Annex C, less than 1 year, 2,500, 8,300, 1 to 2 years, 2 to 3 years, 2,000 odd people. Now, by the time the contract expires, the offsetting arrangement will apply to them. And there will not be any protection for them at all. They are working alongside the civil servants, and these staff will not enjoy any retirement protection because of the offsetting arrangement. What do you think that would make them feel? And they don't have any long-term prospect, and the government should really consider their situation. In Annex D, 30,000 or above, 1,650, 16,000 to 29,000, 2,703, between 8,000 and 15,000, 7,199 people. Now, they are the breadwinners in their households. They're supporting their entire households themselves. But every time the contract comes to an end, the offsetting arrangement will apply to them. These are the people who have been serving on a pretty long-term basis, and this arrangement is grossly unfair to them. In Annex B, 6,000, although serve less than 3 years, 1,200 between 3 to 5 years, 4,500 are serving 5 years or more. They are making a long-term contribution and are serving the government on a long-term basis. Perhaps the administration might wish to consider my request. Secretary, there are 2 points there from Mr. Wong. The first one is they're different from civil servants, but a lot of them do enjoy the end of contract gratuity, which doesn't apply to government workers. The offsetting arrangement, this is a wider issue. Basically, we are working in accordance with the law as to whether the offsetting arrangement should be changed. This should be discussed in a wider context. We will follow any decision made. Mr. Wong, well, I hope that the government would do it like you dealt with the paternity leave. The government should be setting a good example as a good employer. Chairman, there are many departments that have been hiring NCSC staff, some to the tune of 500. Perhaps over the past 10 years, the government should tell us the statistics over the years to determine how the demand is like. Let's say postmen, we may need a certain number of postmen 10 years ago and another number this year. All right, let's move on to the next item. Review on conditioned hours of work for Mod 1 grade staff. Secretary, please. Chairman, back in March, members probably recall, we told members that regarding the Mod 1 condition hours review, I'd like to bring members up to date on the review findings. This is in response to the aspirations of the Mod 1 grades. We started review in 2013 to consider whether we can change the condition working hours from 44 gross net to 45 net. And we have to consider the prerequisites, of course, neutrality, the manpower, and the same level of service to the members of the public. We also took into account the Mod 1 staff working for the hospital authority. After the first phase of review, 7,000 or so, of the 7,000 or so, 1,500 can be reduced to 45 hours conditioned hours of work without breaching the prerequisites. However, given the same grade, same condition hours principle, we consider that only the barber, the explosive depot attendants, gardener, and suppliers attendant, about 40 of them, that can be considered feasible to reduce their condition hours of work to 45 hours gross per week. For the other 7, they are not achievable. Now, we understand that members would like to take this further, so that's why we conducted the second stage of review. We've had the tripartite meeting so that the management and the Mod 1 Council representatives can sit down and consider whether, subject to the conditions that I mentioned, the working condition hours can be reduced. After a frank and honest exchange of views, I'm sure members would appreciate that at this point in time, if we reduce the conditioned hours, it may not be achievable without causing additional resources. And having considered the situation, if we achieve the reduction, we may have a situation where the same grade will have a different pay and rewards. So at this point in time, it is our view that it will be difficult for us to achieve the reduction, with the exception of the 4 grades that I referred to earlier on. But having said that, we will continue to maintain dialogues with the staff side through the council. We will be monitoring the situation, and we will explore whether there will be other ways to improve the situation. If I may make some clarifications here, there are suggestions that the government is not setting a good example of dealing with the workers by not providing the meal break. Now, this gross system, the net system, about the meal break, in terms of the conditioned hours of work. Now, under the gross system, the civil servants will be arranged to have a meal break. Now, the only difference is that if work is arranged during the meal break for the net system, that the time put in would be considered as overtime. Now, for the gross system, this has already been built into the scheme, and the work assigned during the meal break will not be recompensed in terms of overtime. So we will consider the operational needs and the different arrangements, but we do provide for meal breaks for the civil servants, and that doesn't deprive them of the eligibility for a meal break. So there is no suggestion of the government maltreating the civil servants at all. 5 minutes for each member. Question and answer. Wong Kwok Heng, Tan Ka Pio, Lee Chuk Yan, Tony Jay. Mr. Wong Kwok Heng first. Chairman, following on from the Secretary's explanation regarding the gross system, the net system, I think the difference lies in whether one will be recompensed in terms of overtime work. Now, for the 7,000 of people, how many hours would they stand to lose, and how much money would they stand to lose per year? Second, in the hospital authority, the staff are not getting paid equally for the same amount of work that they undertake. Now for staff of the HA, they get paid for the meal break, but for the 560 supporting staff, they are excluded from the recompense arrangement. If you do not resolve this problem, I'm sure that it would be a fertile ground for arguments going forward.
and the surface will be further divided. According to the review, only 40 people can enjoy this paid lunch hour. So, concerning the principles or prerequisites of cost neutrality, no additional manpower, and maintaining a single level of service to the public, perhaps the threshold has been set too high. Well, concerning the OT issue, we may not have the figures because OT is only done when needed. For 7,000 odd staff members, how much OT payment they have received, we don't have the figures with us. Concerning the HA, our staff are civil servants, and therefore they are subject to arrangements for the whole service. We understand your concerns. The HA has been talking to the Department of Health to ensure that such staff working in the HA will not be subject to longer working hours. For similar work, the pay may not be the same. If you look at the Mod 1 grades, compared to other staff in the HA, the pay level may be different. For civil servants, for 2011 figures, the maximum pay was 11,900 odd. For those who have switched over to the MPF scheme, the pay level is similar. For similar staff engaged later, the maximum is 9,000 odd. So similar grades or trades inside the HA, because of different working hours and different status, the pay level would be different. I understand that could be one management issue, and I understand that the HA is capable of dealing with this issue. Chairman, according to the review, 40 people may enjoy the new arrangement. Isn't that laughable? When can the rest of them enjoy 45 gross conditioned hours of work per week? On the second point, I will ask my colleague to respond. We have explained time and again in terms of using resources wisely and overall operational needs of the government. We don't think it's acceptable to affect level of service provided to the public. And in order to make improvements, we need to inject more resources. If you consider the situation in the government, we need to consider the matter of priority. With less working hours without pay cut, in terms of using resources, we have to be prudent. Chairman, Mr. Wong asked about 1,500 odd staff members. We have done the review, we have talked to the departments, and in theory, they meet the 3 criteria and they can enjoy shortened hours of work. But for the same grade in the same department, we need to ensure that the change of working hours must be imposed on everyone. So after second stage review, there could be difficulties because in some of the departments, it can be applied to one certain grade, but it cannot be applied to a similar grade in a different department. For the 40 odd staff members, we will talk to the departments and we'll see if we can implement the pilot scheme as soon as possible. Mr. Tangkapio? Thank you, Chairman. Concerning Mod 1 review on conditioned hours of work, it is a joke. More than 7,000 people enjoying the minimum level of salary. 0.5% of them can enjoy this new benefit after so much has been done. 40 people will benefit, It's a waste of time and effort. Don't you have anything else better to do, or is there a lack of sincerity? It's a joke. 7,000 odd. If we need to inject more resources, let's talk about this. But that's not the case. For 1,539 staff members, they do meet the 3 prerequisites, but yet they will not be covered. And we do not see any timetable. So we don't know when they will enjoy the new arrangement. So it is like a loud thunder, but hardly any rain. So why did you even do it? I don't understand. And our Mod 1 staff, the morale level will even shrink further. They talked about whether certain people can be given a priority and can enjoy the benefit first. At the end, no one gets any benefit. Do you think that is the most fair? Or are you telling us that according to the Financial Secretary, you're going to freeze any increase of resources into any department, and therefore, even for the Mod 1 staff, they cannot enjoy any new arrangements? Second question. For those 4 grades that have passed the hurdle, 40 staff involved, are you going to have other recruitment exercises for these 4 grades? Or once they retire, you won't hire new people? Is that the situation? So you just want to hand out some candy to them before they retire? What about Workman 1, Workman 2, because you need to recruit them all the time? Therefore, you are reluctant in allowing them to switch over to the new arrangement. So you just want to give those who are about to retire a better time. Thank you, Mr. Tang. First of all, since day 1 of the review, we have explained to our colleagues that this is not an easy task. We all understand this is actually very difficult because of resource constraints, so on and so forth. Secondly, we are sincere in this work. We've spent a lot of time to talk to our colleagues. There's been a number of meetings to ensure the departments, or the 2 major departments, engaging more Mod 1 staff. Ensure that they have actually considered all the relevant situations, and the staff have provided plenty of views on the way forward. For the same grade, the pay level can be different for a shorter time period. Otherwise, if people at the same grade, some of them have to work longer hours or enjoy different pay level for a longer term period of time, it may lead to problems. We have to consider the prerequisites. If we relax the arrangement for 1 grade, other grades will ask for the same treatment. I understand that they want shorter working hours. But of course, we have to consider the overall use of public money. And there could be serious consequences if we amend the prerequisites casually. For the 4 grades that are to benefit, we actually will continue to recruit supplies attendants. So the other 3, no more new recruitments. Ms. Chen? At the moment, they are employed under their own department. When they retire, there will be no new recruitments. So other than supplies attendant, barber, explosive depot attendant, and gardener, there will be no more recruitments. Well, that's it. Mr. Lee Chek-Yan, this paper reflects the mindset of the government. The government would like to fatten those on top and exploit those at the bottom. That's it. civil servants sitting right next to you, they are about to enjoy pay rise of another 30%. Because of the bonus are so huge in the private market, and therefore they should enjoy pay rise. But what about these people at the bottom? They have been exploited for so long. They have to work for 51 hours per week. You have so many excuses: total working hours, gross working hours. Basically, 45 hours without calculating the lunch hours. If we do include the lunch hours, 51, and the lunch hours are not paid. If they have to work over lunch hour, they can get OT payment, but they are asking for fair treatment, 44 across the board. If you have to work overtime during lunch, at least the treatment should be equal for everyone. 7,000 odd people, only 40 will benefit. Before the review, you knew there is no way out because of the 3 prerequisites. No cost addition, no additional manpower, maintaining same level of service. Because of these prerequisites, it is simply impossible to benefit all 7,000 staff. You need more people, you need more resources, for sure. How come you can enjoy pay rises at the top and you're not allowing fair treatment on working hours for the people at the bottom? You talk about history, it's been going like that for decades, but we seek equality in the new era. It's been unfair for decades. Can we ask for equality now? They don't get that much. They're at the very bottom. And CY Leung said that we don't need to pay any attention to those earning less than 14,000 a month. So he doesn't care. Is that what you're saying? Then you should just say it, that you don't care. But it is really unfair. You are allowing it to continue, and this review is rubbish because of the 3 prerequisites. The result is doomed from day one. So my question is, are you going to start another round of review, remove the 3 prerequisites? Otherwise, you are continuing to exploit people at the bottom, and you try to explain that people is not mistreating these people, but you are actually exploiting them. You are being very harsh to them. Secretary, I don't agree that we're being harsh on the frontline staff for each grade and the pay level. It is reflected on the work condition. So how much they get is reflected in the total working hours. If we can amend the working hours and improve the level of service, of course we would agree. But there is no exploitation involved. We are not trying to take more away from the people at the bottom. As we have explained to members, every 6 years, we do pay level review. Frontline staff, their level of pay compared to the private sector is comparable. So we must follow this mechanism. As for total working hours or gross working hours, they are all calculated based on actual operational needs. One staff may not work 9 to 5. At the moment, there are different working hours for different grades. Even for civilian grades in disciplined services, that is a difference between the two. And even inside the disciplined services, for example, fire service department, again, they have different working hours. So the prerequisites apply to all departments across the board, not just for this exercise.
Mr. Lee, Chairman, he said that the government is not exploiting the bottom rungs, but you're fattening up the upper rung of the civil servants, that's for sure. Mr. Tony J. Chairman, thank you. The review of the conditioned hours for Mod 1 scale, if this is achievable, that would represent an improvement in the condition of service. I fully appreciate that the government has to abide by the established policies, including the 3 prerequisites that were referred to, and they are namely cost neutrality. Please, I'm taking the floor, Chairman. Please respect me. Order, please. Mr. J. The 3 prerequisites are namely cost neutrality, no additional manpower, and maintaining the same level of service to the members of the public. In para 11, it refers to a number of grades that are put on the pilot scheme. I gather that they fulfill the 3 prerequisites. Why do you still have to conduct a pilot scheme? There may be certain grades that can fulfill the 3 prerequisites. Will you allow them to join this trial? And would you make it simpler in this regard? Secretary. Now we mentioned the 4 grades. They are pretty small grades themselves. Depending on the complexity, now some can be complicated, like the Fire Services Department, things can be more complicated. They have to try out the scheme before they can see a reduction to 50 or 51. Now this is being tried out, but we're talking about a small number of staff in this way, so things can be simpler, and we can certainly expedite the process. Perhaps my colleague, Ms. Chen, can supplement. Chairman, indeed, I would like to adopt a more cautious approach. On paper, the departments consider that without affecting the service to the members of the public and without affecting cost and manpower, they can reduce the conditioned hours. But we would like to proceed cautiously. On paper, it may be feasible, but we'd like to try out to make sure that they would be able to fulfill all these targets before we implement this formally. The Secretary mentioned the Fire Services Department, which is more complicated. We had a number of phases. In each phase, we review the situation with the department. Likewise, we will liaise with the departments regarding the length and also the targets that they would like to achieve. Mr. J. Now, for complicated cases, would the trial period be something like 1 year? FSD, the trial lasted for 3 years. I'm sure that this one would be a lot simpler. It would depend on the situation. All right, Mr. Leung Chi Chang. Chairman, thank you. Chairman. Now here we are talking about a review on conditioned hours of work for Mod 1 grades. If we do not have any criteria or principles, it will not be good enough. But these 3 conditions are very stringent. If you apply these prerequisites, no additional manpower, cost neutrality, and maintaining same level of service to the public, these 3 nothing or 3 no prerequisites would be very stringent. I'm wondering whether you would review to see whether we don't apply all of them at the same time. Let's say manpower for Mod 1 grades, is it true that we cannot increase the manpower anymore? I think it is because of the manpower shortage that they have to work up to 45 hours. Now, if you do not increase the resources, well, I'm sure that they can be recompensed for the overtime work over the meal break. There may be implications if you increase the resources. I think increasing the manpower would be the way forward. Here in this review, you said that only 40 out of 7,000 people would be eligible, would be achievable, and this is wholly disappointing. It's not worth doing it. Now, we are in the second stage of review. I'm wondering whether there will be a third stage of review whereby you will consider whether the three would have to be applied concurrently, or will you be making it more flexible? Secretary, a couple of points there, Chairman. Now, the three prerequisites, as I said, we're not relaxing this in this regard because we are not applying this to these grades. We did have some success stories like the Fire Services Department and earlier the Correctional Services Department. For Mod 1, it is more complicated because of sheer number of staff, 7,000 or so, and they are scattered across different departments. For different jobs, it would be far simpler than if we are talking about one single department like FSD and CSD. If we relax these prerequisites, there would be profound implications. Well, the other thing is we conducted the review in response to members' aspirations. We started off knowing full well all the difficulties, but we would like to conduct a fair and open review. And we understand the situation. Now, under the three prerequisites, or the four prerequisites, we thought that it would be achievable, but after the review exercise, we do appreciate that there would be difficulties. As to a manpower increase, we do increase the manpower on a yearly basis. And if you merely increase the manpower in order to reduce the conditioned hours, that would give rise to another issue altogether. Now, with additional manpower, will there be more room to consider this possibility? We do not rule this out. We will look at this continuously. But it would not be practical for us to conduct another review because it would not make any major difference to the situation. Now, if all the vacancies have been filled and without any additional work, would there be further room for considering this? The answer is yes. We will not close the file on this. We will continue to liaise with the Mod 1 Council. But we will not conduct the major review that we conducted previously because there will not yield any material difference. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong, 5 minutes. Three prerequisites means dishonesty, no reform, no repentance. Now we are talking about 40 out of 7,000, and you call this effective. Now, Mr. Tony Jay has just left. Now, this policy is being unfair. You have to have a timetable to reform the policy. if I take a complaint to the district office, I will be entitled to a reply within 3 weeks. See Wai Leung talked about all these problems before he took office. He talked about all these deep-seated problems in Hong Kong. So many people in Hong Kong are struggling at the lower rung of the community, whereas so many are enjoying the benefits at the top rung. Now, only 40 out of 7,000, I think it is wholly absurd. Mr. Tang, you used to be working for the Social Welfare Department. Now, there are 3 conditions where you can become chief executive. Number 1, you don't want any pay, and you can live until 100, and so on. I mean, would this be a possibility? Now, when you buy the property, would there be any condition that you don't move in, you don't rent it out, you don't need a bank mortgage? Would you be able to buy a property? Would you call this person being out of his mind? Now, what are you playing with? What you are driving at is to drive down the wages of the workers, and they can do no more than security guards and working for 7-Eleven and so on. And in terms of wages, it is a race to the bottom. I mean, you simply can't compete in the open market. Secretary, do you speak good enough Putonghua? Do you read, or can you read simplified Chinese characters? If you work in the private sector, you've been phased out. Now, those are earning below $14,000, they are given a short shrift. And when you hire people, you cannot hire people at a level higher than the private sector. Why don't you resign and try to compete in the private sector? Why don't you try your luck in the private sector? If you can, then I will give you a pay rise when you come back. It is a classic example of fattening up the top and exploiting the bottom. You are so rich, you're enjoying such a fat package. And these people are asking for a small raise in their pay. Now, you talk to those collecting garbage outside. Do they have enough to eat on or to live on? Secretary, you come to work by chauffeur-driven car, and you are saying all of these. I think it's a waste of time. Now, these outsourced workers, if they occupy your offices in protest, then you will have a hard time. There were 5 days nobody's cleaning the toilet, and there are days when the air conditioners are out of order, and there may be 5 days when nobody is pouring you tea or serving you tea, and you're dining and whining with all these tycoons, and I think it's $500 at the moment. Can you deduct the $500 out of this package? You pay for the meal and you pay for the entertainment. Would you be prepared to pay for the entertainment and offer the money to those who are serving you, who are cleaning your toilet, who are serving you tea? I think you're being corrupt. That's why so many people are taking to the street on their shopping expedition. They are taking to the street. Mr. Leung, time is up. I think the Secretary heard what you had to say. There are 2 members who raised their hands for the second round. 3 minutes, please. Tang Ka-piu and Li Choi-yan. Mr. Tang.
I would like to ask for some figures. 7411. If they can be working under the new arrangement for 45 hours per week, how much more money do you have to spend, or how many more staff do you need to recruit to achieve the 45-hour target? If you don't have the figures, I seriously query what's happened in this process of review. Second question, for the 4 that will enjoy the new arrangement, 3 will involve no new recruitment. What about the rest? Would 7 grades be phased out totally? No more recruitment, or what is the situation? What about civil servants in the HA? I can see HA is one department. It is not Department of Health. So for the 500 odd staff members who are working under the hospital authority, they have to work 45 hours without lunch breaks that are paid for, while others are only working 44 hours. Can you give higher priority to DFH staff? Chairman, thank you, Mr. Tang. We don't have the figures because the principles, as we understand, are cost neutrality, no additional manpower, and same level of service. We have to insist on all 3 principles. It is not about money. Of course, the money involved will not just be 10 million. Basically, we have not given thoughts to that because the basic principle cannot be violated. Secondly, other grades will continue to recruit. There is no so-called recruitment freeze. Thirdly, about the HA. These people are civil servants, and if they're working in the same grades, they are subject to civil service rules. For example, some colleagues are taking retirement benefits. The situation is different from those working under HA. DFH staff at the same grades, they are civil servants, and therefore the working conditions, including working hours, would be subject to civil service rule. Mr. Lee Chak-yan, 3 minutes per person from now on. If you reduce working hours, that is a reduction of 6 hours, that is about 10% of working duration. So you need to add 10% of staff or even less. You cannot add by more than 11 to 12% of the manpower. So it is stable employment opportunity. Why don't you allow local people to have more opportunities? Why do you have to outsource all the time and then the contractors exploit the staff? You just want to outsource all the workman 1 and workman 2 grades. So exploitation and outsourcing together lead to exploitation by private contractors. Only contractors with the lowest bid will win the contract. And at the same time, you offer unfair treatment to the staff. They are working very long hours already. And this arrangement is really not in line with equality aspirations in the community. If we allow this to continue, just like the NCSC staff arrangement, you are nurturing this bomb in the community. We'll see when it explodes. I think civil servants and unions have to go on strike. They have to depend on themselves. Otherwise, we just sit here and talk to you. You don't listen to us. The only way out is to go on strike. And any platform for consultation is a joke. You should talk to the unions representing civil servants, but there is no negotiation, and there's only consultation. You are going against the basic law and international labor laws. It says clearly here, it is only a consultation, and there is no negotiation, and you continue to exploit your staff. So you are nurturing a very serious threat, and eventually there will be an explosion of sentiment in the society. You allow small things to accumulate, and eventually something big will happen. I can only wish you luck. I don't know how you're going to spend the Christmas. NCSC and Mod 1 staff will all come out and perhaps do something around Christmas. The community has been pushed to its edge, and you will have to suffer from the dire consequences. Understand it, you won't do anything even if you provide a reply today. This is the expertise of Mr. Paul Tang. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, the 3 prerequisites are cost neutrality and other 2 conditions. So we want to use wisely public money. What about the XRL project going over budget? Many senior government officials and civil servants have been involved. You have made mistakes leading to how much losses? What about MTRC? It's been under your wing for a long time, over budget, but still they got special bonuses. How can you talk about use of public money wisely? What government can go over budget by more than 100 billion and still remain? What government will have such low public rating? You should all have been fired a long time ago. You should have resigned. CFOs, CEOs in the private sector resign if they fail. So you should learn from their experience. Think about what you have done. All 3 of you. Perhaps I'm not just targeting you. If you apply the same logic onto what you have done, I want to ask you. In the stock market, the Hong Kong government has lost more than 40%. Are you going to withdraw from the market? The CFOs may say, oh, it is not my fault. It is because of the salary that is too high for the person serving me tea and scrubbing the toilet. How can you insist on the 3 prerequisites? You are distorting everything. You can spend another 11% of salary so that they can work shorter hours, and people who are unemployed will get opportunities to work. You are handing over so much money to the consortia, and what about outsourcing work? The retired senior government officials are now heading the consortia, dealing with you. The superiors are scolding people under them. So these retired officials are scolding the civil servants underneath them. You can go to New World. And what about the younger brother of Cheng Yam-kun? He's doing exactly that. So what are you doing? Do not assume that the Occupy movement is over and you can do whatever you want. There will be people taking it to the streets every day because this government is contaminated, is corrupted. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, your time is up. That's the end of our discussion on this item. AOB, if there's no other business, meeting adjourned. Thank you.